A very good afternoon. I am Kushagra Chalani, a proud foreign analyst and staff member. Our loss at the passing of Mr. V.S. Mahesh last year is immense. But I would only say that remembrance of him is a great source of inspiration and strength. At this moment, with a great round of applause, let us welcome our special guest of the day, Mr. Sundar, who is the brother of Mr. V.S. Mahesh. Mr. V.S. Mahesh's sister-in-law, Ms. Sita. Mr. Mahesh's cousin, Ms. Radhika. Mr. Harpal Singh, Chairman Emeritus of Fortis Healthcare. And we all share a warm welcome with all the esteemed guests present here and all the soil students, and we thank you for your presence. I would now like to briefly share some background about Mr. V.S. Mahesh. Mr. Mahesh created India's first manpower development centers at Telco, Pune, and was a part of the Apex teams at Taj Hotel and Birmingham for 17 years and introduced Europe's first Masters of Science in Service Management. He then returned to India in the year 2011. Apart from various articles and publications that he wrote, he also wrote a book titled Thresholds of Motivation, the Corporation as a Nursery for Human Growth. And he really talked about the importance of making cultures in the organizations really conducive to human development, as similar to nursery, which is designed to protect, nurture, and enable the cultural flowers. I very fondly remember, because I think I was extremely fortunate to have experienced the presence of Mr. Mahesh last year as a soil student. And it was a great privilege, and I regarded him as a true walking encyclopedia, I must say, in the field of HR excellence and service quality. He would very joyfully share amazing examples and his personal experiences in a very wonderful manner with the students. And some of the very important key takeaways were some wonderful concepts of moments of truth, which signifies the importance of customer and employee relationship and interface, as well as the emphasis on quality, because it is said that quality is something which is remembered long after the price is forgotten. Now I take this moment to introduce Mr. Harpal Singh, who would be delivering this memorial lecture today. Mr. Harpal Singh has wide-ranging experience in the corporate and social world and has held leadership positions in automobile, consumer products and healthcare sectors. He is currently the Chairman Emeritus of Fortis Healthcare. He is also associated at the board level with some of India's most renowned schools, and is a member of India-UK Roundtable, India-US Strategic Dialogue, and that of the Public Health Foundation of India. We welcome you, sir. I would now invite Mr. Sachdev to say a few words, to come and say a few words.
I can almost hear Mahe's booming voice at the background saying, I say, Anil, what are you doing? You know, this is the year 1974, and the story must be told again. I was a summer intern in Tata Motors, Telco, Pune, and I landed up for my summer internship, and Mr. Mukhopadhyay, the training manager who was supposed to guide me, was not there. He had gone on leave. So here is an intern who was hired for a project, and this guide is gone on leave, long leave. So I was just hanging around, I didn't know what to do. So Mahesh saw me, and his office was very close by, and he said, what are you doing here? I said, I've come for my internship. So he said, okay, Mukhopadhyay has gone, you come and start working with me. So it was very interesting how he took the initiative to sort of take me under his wings. And of course, I'll never forget the fact that after that internship was over, he introduced me to Arun Maira, who delivered the first lecture, and Arun Maira interviewed me after my project was over, and I told him certain things about my life which indeed had come true over the years. And I still remember I was dating my wife Neera, and she was staying in the Ferguson College hostel. And that morning we had gone to Vaishali, which is this restaurant opposite the Ferguson College. And we used to go and have our dosa and idli every morning there, early morning. And so we were sitting there having our dosa and filter coffee, and there walked in my name and Mahesh. So what are you doing here? I said, I'm about to join the so-and-so company. And I was, being offered a position by Unilever those days, and also I had an offer from DCM Data Products, DCM Group actually. And so Mahesh looked at me and said, you are not joining anywhere. So I said, what do you mean you're not joining anywhere? He said, tomorrow you're coming and working with me. So I said, but Telco has decided not to recruit management graduates anymore because they were trying to encourage GEDs. They had stopped recruiting management trainees and so on. He said, no, but there is another scheme that we have, so don't worry, we'll find a way to get you in. And next day I go there and he refuses to discuss with me what other offers I am considering. He just said, you go for your medical test. That's how my journey with Mahesh began. There are many examples of your first boss which has very great impact on you. I think many of you would experience that, soil students, and many of us have experienced it. I'll just recount 5 things about Mahesh which I learned from him. One, he would say, never ever walk into your colleague's room or your boss's room without something to note ideas. Because when you are going to have a dialogue, and if you do not remember what you have discussed, remember that your memory may be great, and he would tell me, Anil, I understand your memory is great, but if I ever catch you walking in my room without a notepad, though these days you may have a smartphone, don't ever do this, just as a simple advice. Number 2, he said, and he would make us do, we had a small team of 6-7 people in our department, so with our spouses, once a month each one would read one book, and we would meet for a potluck dinner at each other's homes, and we would share the lessons from the book. He said, your books are going to be your best friend. Remember to read one book every month. And I never forgot that advice for the first many years of my life. Read one book every month. It doesn't matter what the book is. Your interest could be philosophy, it could be literature, it could be music. It doesn't matter what your interests are, but read one book every month. Number 3, Mahesh was an extraordinary person when it came to imagination. He would say, we should always plan best. Why would you ever dream about doing second best? And he said, you should always aim for the very best in whatever you do. So when we were just setting up, even before we were setting up the Pune plant and Telco, he made us all believe, and I remember going and recruiting at the IIT when I was myself a very young person. I would walk into an IIT and I would say with complete confidence, we are going to build the world's finest automobile plant in this part of the world. And I meant every word because that's the way Mahesh made us think. And I think he made us all imagine it. Number 4, he said to us, never forget the people who work with you, no matter how junior they are to you or senior they are to you, never forget them for the rest of your life. And I think Mahesh maintained that. It was amazing for me to see the relationship he had with the students in Buckingham. So many years after he had graduated, including one of them lives in the Aralia where I live. And when he came to know that I am a friend of Mahesh, he is Sanjeev Rai, this guy who built the metro, his son. So when he came to know I am, Mahesh's colleague, he said, that professor, I will never forget for the rest of my life because he knew each one of us personally and took personal interest in each one of us. And there are so many stories. Long after I left Telco in 78, long time back. But the fact that I maintained a relationship with him is because of who Mahesh is. The kind of love and affection he had for just about anybody who worked with him is something exceptional. And last, I would say about Mahesh what I learned. Honor the spiritual dimension in yourself. Aim for higher purpose. And I think we were very convinced that in life, ultimately, and I think this is exemplified, when I turned 50, he told me, Anil, I hope you are no longer excited by the thing you were excited when you were in your 30s. I said, what do you mean? He said, when you were starting your consulting company, you used to get very excited when you won $1 million contract. But if that still excites you at 50, I would be very disappointed. I hope your priorities have changed, he said. I said, well, Mahesh, now that you say it in those many words, I think you are absolutely right. My priorities have changed. I no longer get a kick out of winning this big contract or doing, making big money. I mean, that is not what life is all about. And he said, honor that in your life there are going to be life stages. And he firmly believed after 50 you should start living for others. Up to 50 you can live for yourself, but after 50 love what you do in the service of others. And I think that's something that some of you can do it even before you don't have to wait till you are there and become less. What do you say? I say. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to say this, that Mahesh was somebody I owe a lot to him in my life. He's somebody we deeply loved, I, my wife, my children. And I think he got me the first break in my life, so I'll never ever forget that. I think I have a deep sense of gratitude towards him. And I want to thank all of you for coming here, especially for the members of Mahesh's family who have chosen to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing with us the gift of Mahesh, for what he did to so many of us. And I'm particularly glad that my two colleagues who are sitting right in the front here, besides Harpal who will deliver the talk, Ravi Gilani and Pradeep Kapse, the GET batch of 1972, IIT Delhi had a rookie of Telco. So Mahesh was looking after their training, even as he himself was making new experiments along with Arun Maira on what manpower development was all about. And I think I'm so glad. And of course to see Shanta Raju and Yogesh Handle and everyone else who has taken Arun Nagpal. So many of you who have come here today, I'm so honored. So thank you very much. And Tushar, it's over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your experience of Mr. BSK. I would now cordially invite Mr. Harpal Singh to deliver the speech.
Well, a very good afternoon to you all, and let me start by thanking Anil for inviting me really to speak on someone whom I very, very dearly love. Have had some wonderful associations right from those early days when I am junior to all the others. Anil and I joined at the same time in 1974. But very old and warm memories of Mahesh. And therefore I'm truly honored to have this opportunity of being able to say a few words about him. And more so about the wonderful sort of association of well over 35 years that one had with him. It was very warm that one remembers him. And it's difficult to say that he's not with us. I think it's better to say that he is with us. And I'm sure that is the case. So let me share a few things with you about him. I'm particularly pleased that Sundar and family and some of the other members of the family and some of my colleagues at that time working as junior, I still continue to be. So our Mahi actually is what we call him, certainly that's what I call him all my late years of experience, was really my senior in the Tata Administrative Service. And it was in June 1974 that I first met him. And I met him actually walking out of the office of one Mr. Malikanwala, who was then the sort of functionary head of the Tata Administrative Service in Bombay House. And really speaking, that was my sort of very brief handshake with him, and I'll say a little about that a little later. But I must say that I really got to know Mahi only in April, May and June of 1975, when my wife and I had just been married and we were joining Telco, and we didn't have a house as yet allotted to us by the company. So Mahi and him, in their usual very sort of gracious selves, said, why don't you come and stay with us? Then the company is able to give you a flat. So we stayed with them, and really speaking, if I may say, that sort of 3 months set the stage, really set the stage for really a lifelong friendship with Mahi and him. And I have to say that the intensity of that friendship has not waned one bit. And somehow, in our interested way, I refuse to admit that he's not there still. So my comment about him still being with us today. But you know, what do you say about such a friend and about such a friendship? Nothing, to my mind, is really enough. And nothing can sort of capture the wonderful dimensions of that relationship. It's one simply a friend, in many ways a mentor. In many ways he acted as my junior on occasion. So he had this wonderful ability to be almost everything that you would want from a dear associate, a dear friend. And that's what he really was. So you had great affection for him as a great professional. You sort of had this affection as a professional. But as Anil just said, you had an even greater affection and respect for him for being a wonderful human being. And that, when that combination happens, you really get a great and so in advance one should say with some emphasis that he was truly a person who you would be proud to call a friend. He was a good friend, and he was everything that friendship, or good friendship, entailed. And he was really wonderful in that sort of sense. So I will share a sort of few things I have told, some examples, some discussions that we had over the years, just to give you a sense of him. And also to say that this is a wonderful way, and I hope that many of you will enjoy these forms of friendship, where not only are you friends in a real sort of way, but you say to yourselves that this friendship has enriched my life in a very substantive way. That's good friendship. So it's not only the fact that you have good times together, but that you have good times together and you walk away feeling enriched as a person, as a professional, as a human being. And certainly Mahi was very much that. So as I said, I met him for the first time on almost the 4th or 5th day of my joining Tata's and the Tata University Service. It was a particularly sort of a challenging thing. I was in a rather interesting cusp of state at that point in time. I had just been selected into the IAS. I had just been working for 6 months with Citibank, so in the banking sector, and then I was also landed the opportunity of joining the Tata Administrative Service. It was a time of some difficulty choices. My parents and all wanted me to join the IAS. I was open to all ideas, and of course I landed up at the TAS, and that's another story, so I'm not going to dabble in that. But in that first meeting, I was walking out of Mr. Malin's office, and we were waiting, and out walked Mahi also from the corridor, and he obviously knew we were the probationers. We had just joined the company, and he extended I suspect I was the first seat in the Tata Administrative Service of the terminal anyway, and he walked up to me with no introduction, extended his hand in a wonderful warm handshake, and I of course immediately recognized that he has to be some senior, and very shortly thereafter that he was actually in the Human Resource Department of Tempo, which was a very respected, I must say, company of the group, probably the most at that point in time of the group. But what touched me at that time was the point that I think Anil just made also, was the great humility with which he extended that hand of handshake. And there was a great learning there. To me, I learned a big lesson from him that day. He was a senior, we were young probationers, and the way he extended that hand and said hello, he actually put me to complete comfort immediately. We were all sort of still a little nervous, but he made me feel at great ease straight away. And there's a big lesson here, I think, for all of us who are going to manage entities, enterprises, institutions, is how do you make your colleagues, irrespective of the status dimension, at ease and comfortable, because that is what makes for great interactions and great associations. So I think, of course, great leaders do this with great ease, and we have many examples of that. As a youngster, I remember sitting on the public day parades and Pandit Nehru sort of walking and prancing almost as our first Prime Minister, and coming and playing with kids who were sitting on carpets. in front of the VIP enclosure. So this ability to make people feel comfortable, and no matter what be the status dimension, is a great quality of leadership. Some of you might wish to take this up with some seriousness, and I can tell you that if you do, it will hold you in very good stead. Well, it was actually after that first meeting, it almost was a year when I caught up with him again. And this was after, in the TAs in those days, I don't know whether they still follow that practice, but all TAs professionals used to go for a 1 year, what we used to call a Bharat Darshan, to various Tata companies across the country. And the purpose was twofold. One was that you got an opportunity to see the companies, different products, different cultures, different geographies, but also to have you experience and see whether you might wish to pick and choose which of the companies that you would like to be associated with. So I'm on this Bharat Darshan, and during that Bharat Darshan, we also visited Telco, or Tata Motors as it is called today. And I have to say that my interest in Telco was very marginal, if not incidental. And the reason was rather simple. We were 9 TS probationers at that time. And I was the only one of the 9, one out of 9, who did not have an engineering degree. All the other 9 had an engineering degree. And all the others also had an MBA. I neither had an engineering degree nor an MBA, so I felt a little limited and said to myself, what would I do in an engineering company? So I had very little interest. But lo and behold, and at that time, as Anil again just said, they were not taking any management, certainly no TAS people. And I said to myself, but surprise, surprise, I am the only one that Telco asked for at that year. They didn't ask for any other engineer or any other MBA. The only request was for me to join the company. Now, forget about meeting surprise. All my 8 other colleagues were surprised because nobody could figure out what happened to Telco this time. You know, how have they selected Harpal? And the surprise, as I said, was obvious because no engineering degree. This was a company that incidentally was very proud of its engineering progress. Very proud. It was a proud company and for good reason. And even more surprising incidentally was when I was informed that not only am I to join Telco Pune, but I am to join Telco Pune in its production engineering division. Now, how many of you are engineers? Engineers? Oh wow, awesome. Okay, so now you can understand. Here is a non-engineer who knows nothing about engineering, and I'm certainly asked to join Telco Pune, an engineering company, and I'm asked to join them with the production engineering division. Now, that really put me, at a little bit of a loss. I couldn't understand what crazy management would do this, that they would pick up a non-engineer and put it. And it's important because I was made to sit in on these meetings, departmental, divisional meetings, where the big bosses sat, along with all their colleagues, great engineers. And I couldn't understand 80% of the language they spoke, I couldn't understand what the hell they were talking about. They would talk about jigs and fixtures and such like stuff. And I thought the only jig that I knew was what you did on the dance floor. I didn't know any other jig. I didn't know what the hell the jig was. Or for that matter, I thought fixtures were things that put on walls and not to use for manufacturing things. Anyway, so you can imagine my sort of surprise, and therefore when that sort of concern and worry began to build within me, that what the hell am I going to do in this company, and where the hell have they put me? Something isn't right. And so it became a sort of a cause of worry for me. And it's again no surprise. Who do you think engineered this great entrepreneurial act, if I may say? None other than Mahesh. And the entire logic of that I wouldn't have understood had it not been for the 3 months that we were house guests to Mahesh in his house. So I began to get a slight sort of indication and realization of what Mahesh and team were up to as they picked up a non-engineer and plumbed to snack center of an arena that he had no understanding of. You know, it may be a good idea to give you some insight of what was Mahesh's and management thinking at that time. Now, most of us, and many of you, as you will go into working life, will realize it doesn't matter in which domain, health, education, industry, it doesn't matter which sector. Most of the solutions that were in these domains that lay purely in those domains are actually done in Europe. Lots of the solutions that we really need now are actually solutions that lie inter-domain. Fine. So if you are a powerful engineering company, if you don't have perspectives that are non-engineering in character also, you cannot be truly the great company that you wish to be. And let me give you an example of this. Many of you will recall that the Japanese auto industry really took on the American auto industry, which were the global leaders, and almost brought the American auto industry onto its knees for a simple idea that they propounded, which was called zero defect. Many of us would have experienced that. They began to produce what they said zero defect cars. Right? And they brought the American auto industry almost to its knees as a consequence. But the Americans are good learners, and they also sort of took them a few years, a decade or so, and they also caught up. So they also began to make zero defect cars. So when that happened, a group of American journalists went to meet the chairman of Toyota and said, Mr. Chairman, now that we have the American auto industry is also making zero defect cars, now what are you going to do? So the chairman sort of looked at them and said, okay, let me answer that question by telling you how I'm going to configure my product development groups of the future. And he said, this group of ours has got a sociologist, a psychologist, an anthropologist, and also an engineer. And the group of American journalists sort of were a little befuddled. You see, Mr. Chairman, we are asking you one question. What kind of an answer is this that you are giving us? And the chairman had a smile on his face and said, see, we are already ahead of you. So the point being that to produce a great car today, a great engineering piece of work, whether it's a bridge, an aircraft, or whatever it is, it's very important that you get multidisciplinary approaches. That you have to do a good engineering job nowadays is given. If you're not producing a good product, forget about being in the business anymore. So Mahi and team, very early, in the early 70s, incidentally, this whole question of interdisciplinary staff, multi-dimensional, were not ideas that existed in the domain of management at that time. But this was the power of thinking and catching early signals. And this is what Mahi did. He recognized along with his, I have to say, along with his mentor, in this case was Arun Mara, who delivered the first lecture last year, that he engineered this thought and took a risk on an idea that if we introduce this kind of element into a sharply powerful engineering company, that perspective, new perspective, will actually add to the quality of what happens in the division and consequently what happens at the level of the company. And I dare say the rest of the world now more than acknowledges that reality as of now. But think of what he did at that time. And I'll tell you why it's particularly important to understand the risk that Mahi was taking. Of course, at that time, incidentally, I didn't know that I was a sacrificial lamb. So here was an idea they had thought about. And here comes this young probationer who put him in that spot. I had no idea what the hell was happening, because who the hell knew what management was up to at that time. And so you were, so to speak, the sacrificial lamb. And they put an idea, proof of concept of which was at yet not at all even adequate, let alone confirmed. Today it is a rather confirmed concept, but at that time there was a proof of it. And the reason why it was a very risky decision was that the other gentleman, who was part of the senior management group, was the resident director, and he was a gentleman which all of us would remember with some affection. A gentleman by the name of Mr. S.Y. Jagat, incidentally, a very hard-nosed, solid engineer. You know, I mean, you don't get better. I will say a few things about him a little later. But what Mahesh had to pretend was he was a hard-nosed engineering boss. There was another boss, Mr. Myra, who had a different view. And so, how to incubate this new idea and make it work? What a risk, because he was putting his own, himself also at risk, because if the project had failed, or the idea had failed, somebody's head would have been on the firing line. So, between the two of them, I think this idea that you introduce, and we know that for futures, that the idea is not so much as to put greater expertise in the same domain. The idea is to broad base it, make it multi-dimensional. All of us know about the limitations of creating silos as against the great advantages of busting silos and opening up silos. We all know that these days in world management. So both Arun and Mahi, I have to say, engineered this wonderful sort of experiment. And all I can say is whether it was ultimately successful or not, I don't know. Maybe that's a subject matter of another talk someday. But suffice it to say that it is very hard-nosed, and incidentally the general comment at that point in time in the company, recognizing that I was a complete novice in engineering, didn't have a clue as to what to do. The general feeling in General Pune at that time was, don't worry, Mr. Singh will be hiccuped out of Telco Pune in very short notice. But the good part of the story is that the director, Mr. Jagat, and I built a terrific relationship, so much so that in later years, when I was asked to lead another truck project, I actually had Mr. Jagat as my advisor. And more often than not, we had to have a big problem in Lucknow Tehzeeb as to who would sit on the chair at the head of the table. And of course, Mr. Jagat, in all his graciousness, would say, now you are the boss, so you will sit at the head of the table. So we built a great relationship, and I think that in some ways was proof of the idea. But the lesson for all of us, and for some of you who are joining working lines, is your ability to catch early signals about where the future is. Your ability then to build belief around those ideas. Your ability then to create programming, solutions, and have the courage, if I may say, to implement them is the big message, I think, is here. These were all very dangerous things to do at that time, as some of my colleagues will remember. As I said, I could have been hiccuped out of Telco Pune by the stroke of a pen. It only required a little wing on the mouth of Mr. Jagat, and I would have found myself on a train out of Pune. But this ability to do this courage is very important. So to sense those early signals and have the courage, I think, is something that's key. Now, this question of believing in yourself and believing in what you do. And Mahi was a great commentator on many of these things, and I remember that he talked about this in great measure. And one of his sort of recurring motives in his writings, in his articles, was this question of believing in what you do. And he was, I remember at one discussion where he talked about Southwest Airlines, and he talked on many of the programs. I know some of you might have heard him use that. Where Southwest Airlines was sort of renowned for its exceptionally good performances, and they were also renowned for having lots of people write about what was good about that. And they were very open about sharing that. And so some of you afraid that you're giving away all your secrets, and telling about what takes and what made you successful? Aren't you worried that your competition will carry on? And Mr. Keller, of course, responded by saying that he's not worried at all, simply for the fact that by the time competition actually understands what we have done, then goes out and does what we have done, it'll take them 10 years. And in 10 years we'll be way ahead again. So that I'm not worried at all in doing this. And Mike used to give this example on many occasions. But the point being, this question of belief, this question of them going behind it and sticking with the cause, I think was a great comment. And he also, of course, used to say that, to be a great service organizer, he spent a large part of his later years on the whole service industry. And he says to build a great service organization is really no great secret. No great secret, He talked about Cadbury as an example, for instance. And he said that all the things that you have to do to become a great service organization, you can pick up in any book and get on with it. And it's not got to do with the hard stuff, with the money and with the rooms and the technology. All that is possible to get. Your competition can get it as well. What his real focus was that the differentiator between a great institution and an average one is really the way that they deal with their people. And I'll tell you an idea which Mahi picked up. I'm sorry that he didn't get occasion to write about it. It is my last sort of chat with him. He was at my house and I proposed to him an idea. And the reason why I proposed it to him was because I knew he would catch it in no time at all. And it's something that I have been thinking about and I've put it in some of our institutions. Is I said to myself, we've talked about many resources that an enterprise needs to succeed. Many resources. We talk about capital, we talk about technology, we talk about land, we talk about a whole bunch of resources. And typically, we also talk about the human resource, right? And I said, Mahi, I know you from your position. Then let me propose to you that frankly speaking, all the other things are resources. But there is only one source, and that's the human. So stop calling the human a resource. There is only one source that ultimately creates success, and that is the human. So the human is the source, everything else is a resource. And you should have seen, he said, Harpal, you can't be more pointedly correct in this idea. So walk away with this idea, I will leave that thought with you, that as you build your organization, as you become part of organizations, remember, at the end of the day, the source of everything is the human that works at that enterprise. Doesn't matter what you do. Whether you're an NGO, whether you're a service organization, whether you're a production system, it doesn't matter what. If the people are right, and we have classic examples in this country. I don't know whether you know that you know what was the timeliness standard for the metro that Mr. Sridharan? You know what was the concept of timeliness that Mr. Sridharan inculcated in the metro organization? He's built what a great and successful organization. Incidentally, his comment on timeliness was plus minus 3 minutes. He said, please don't come to the office early. It's wasteful. I have to put on lights, I've got to put on air conditioning, I've got to do, and 10 of you come and I've got to put the whole bloody system. It's wasteful. He don't come earlier than 3 minutes and don't come later than 3 minutes. That's what timeliness means. But who was he saying this to? His trains used to run on time. He built a great system. He was saying it to his people. Because they ultimately, if they agree on that idea, it will work. So think of the idea, and I remember this discussion with Mahi, and I must say that my goodness, what a so he said a systematic approach to human resources. And that systematic approach must be built on and he's very, very particular about, on a bedrock of fairness, a bedrock of equity. Please must feel that I'm part of an equitous system. Not some system because I happen to know somebody, therefore I get something. Not at all. Fairness and equitous. And of course, at the end of the day, something which you all must believe in great measure is to have augmented, inspired leadership. And leadership is, the management of leadership or the system of leadership is at once, I would say, a science, but at once an art also. And to be a great leader, you have to again combine that two great things. You have to understand the science of leadership, but in a great sense, the art of leadership is something that you all must be conscious about how you will do that. Now, I had, as I was saying, many interesting discussions with mine, long discussions. We went on to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on many discussions around management. We talked staffing, organizational culture, about change and how to effect change, about values, about the distinction between personal and private. What is personal and private? About power. How do you use power? Its use, its various dimensions, about public good, and the importance of good citizens. That we are in that particular phase right now in the country. How do good citizens stand up and contribute to the larger good? This question of working for the others, of course, but no matter what age you are, whether you are in school, or in wherever you are, how do you contribute to the larger good? And how do you stand up for what is right is something that I can still remember. And when I was sort of sitting last Sunday and thinking about what am I going to say, I actually was rather sort of amazed at myself at the great things that we spoke about. I never sort of put it together having to speak for the first time about him, and suddenly was sort of rather excited by what all we spoke about. How intense actually the discussion was. At some times it sounded almost childlike, very childlike. At other times it sounded absurdly, I would say, aspirational. We talked about, things that sounded impossible. But that was the kind of sort of discussion that we found when, we found ourselves idealistic, energizing in our debate. And I said to myself, this doesn't happen with everyone. You can't do this with everybody. I can't think of 20 other people, 10 other people, who I can say that this happened. And then I ask myself the question, so what does it do? What is this kind of person who you can have this kind of a discussion and debate with? And then, the quality that sort of flowed was sort of obvious. You have to be a person that is open, not a closed person. You have to be an open person. You have to be a person who listens. Do that. You'll find great advantage in life if you are a good listener. You have to be intense. What do we do? We've got to be passionate about it. I remember when I was putting up, I was telling this little story. We were putting up the first hospital in Fortis healthcare. Some of you will know Fortis healthcare, I hope. Not for the fact that you need any treatment, but for the fact that you need a good medical system. But when I was putting up the first hospital in Mohali, this is in 2001, and I visited all the great hospital systems of the world. And so here I am at the Cleveland Clinic, speaking to the director of projects at the Cleveland Clinic. And we don't even have a hospital, we've never run a hospital, I'm not a doctor, and so we are having this talk. And he suddenly says to me, after 2 days, very excited by what we were planning to do. And he said, Mr. Singh, I want to show you our own growth plan model. They were putting up a new hospital in the cardiac field in Florida, out of Cleveland. And he showed us the plans, and we were very excited to see them. And in his crowning comment at the end of that presentation, he says to me, and Mr. Singh, I'm going to beat US best standard by building this hospital. The US best standard, incidentally, for building a super specialty cardiac facility, 200 beds, was 48 months, 4.5 years, 4 years. So I heard him, and I said to him after a while, I said, I'm very impressed, and obviously you guys are doing a great job. but you know, Dr. London, that was his name. I said, Dr. London, but you know, I'm going to build mine in 18 months. And I tell you, I had hardly completed the sentence when I knew that this was not a collaboration that was happening. Because this fellow looked at me and said, this Durban fellow doesn't know what he's talking about. We didn't have an answer. This idea of challenging the boundary and attempting the impossible is something which it should excite you young people like nothing else should. And so anyway, we didn't get a collaboration with the people. Clearly we got a collaboration with the Harpal system. And guess what? We started our first hospital. From the time we struck the first pickaxe on the property to the time we did the first surgical procedure was 11 months, 17 months and 23 days. And the best letter that I got from anybody who was in writing was Dr. London. He wrote me a wonderful letter because he'd heard about it at that time. So this question of being intense, being aspirational, challenging boundaries, were things that, you know, certainly in my conversations with Mahesh, there were, in all this, you must also have an ability to enjoy humor. You know, life isn't worth it if you don't have a humorous end to yourself. And I can tell you this, Mahesh was a person who had a lot of that, and I'll just speak a little bit about it. But at the end of the day, Mahesh was that kind of person. Intense, hopeful, aspirational, wonderful in terms of idealism, and yet oftentimes would sort of speak such practicality that was mundane. And so I think this ability to be that kind of person. So all of you, I would urge you to think about what would be. And the most important, I would say, how do you make people who are with you comfortable in the expression? Remember the first meeting I spoke about. He made me comfortable the very first time I shook hands with him. What an ability that you hardly meet a person and the person makes you feel comfortable. That's an amazing, amazing quality. Now, all of us are taught by our parents, by our teachers, by our mentors, friends, and one thing we must all try and achieve in life is to be a wholesome person. Right? So wholesomeness has many dimensions. But one important dimension of wholesomeness, if I may say, and I say this particularly in the context of mind, is to have a sense of humor. And not only have a sense of humor, have the ability to laugh at yourself. Very important. You will find that you will be a de-stressed person. De-stressed. If you, one, have an ability to be humorous, and secondly, you have an ability to laugh at yourself. And Mahesh was a terrible guy in that respect. Partly I think simply for the fact of the kind of person he was. And secondly, I suspect a lot of his humor had to do with the kind of circumstances he found himself in. And I will share one or two of those. Now, for those of us who sort of knew Mahesh, he was a very hardcore Tamilian, in the sense his entire growing up, and so he spoke Tamil well, he spoke English well, but ask him to speak Hindi, and you would be in splits. And the interesting thing about Mahesh was, poor fellow, the harder he tried, the funnier he got. So it was an incredible situation of having him sort of speak Hindi and attempt Hindi. And like I said, that was just him. But part of it also was the fact that he was put into circumstances where he had to speak Hindi. And he had all India responsibilities for his large group. And I used to be posted in Delhi, so he used to be a house guest very often. And he would come and say to me and share, he said, today I have to deliver this very complex proposal to my union in Delhi, and he has to speak in Hindi. So, so he's sitting in our house, evening before, practicing Hindi sentences to get the idea of what kind of thing. And suddenly, I'm sort of sitting with him, reading his stuff, and suddenly I hear a slow gurgle. He begins to gurgle, within himself. And suddenly he burst out into laughter because he suddenly realized that he was sounding absurdly funny even to himself. So he sort of lost the relationship that they trusted him and they relied on his good judgment on matters that were actually very important and sensitive to the company. They relied on his good judgment. So he used that circumstance, I suspect, of the early years to sharpen his knowledge about leadership, and the styles of leadership. And for instance, what are leadership qualities that are effective? What are disruptive? Because there are much in what Mr. Jagata did, which was felt by many was destructive. Or what were those things in leadership that actually speaking would allow you to be effective in whatever is the outcomes that you are attempting to achieve. But Mahi persisted with this learning, and I know that in many discussions over the years that he became sharper and sharper in his appreciation of he sort of figured out what are the sort of multipliers of good decisions and what are the less than good decisions. Beyond just understanding leadership, I would say that Mahi had a purpose behind the madness. He wasn't just wanting to understand leadership for the sake of understanding leadership. He believed that there was a larger purpose, that leadership should be, all the power that leaders have should be used for a larger good. And I think this comment of saying at 50, if you haven't been a leader or an individual that is not thinking only for yourself, then frankly speaking, it's a. And I again think that in some measure, a lot of what I do, 95% of the work I do these days of a very busy 7-day week is in the not-for-profit world. It's got nothing to do with making money. And I can tell you this, far and much more immensely satisfying than anything that I did in the world of profit. But I think those early discussions were important discussions that one had, and I think I greatly benefited, as I'm sure many of you would also. Now, I'm coming close to the end, but let me just say this, that Mahi was a very interesting student, also of statecraft, and my own discussions, incidentally, as I mentioned, that subsequent years became advisor to me in the truck project that I was leading. But he and we had great discussions on people like Machiavelli and Chanakya, and what works and what doesn't work. So he was a great student of statecraft. He was very keen on understanding complex organizations. So he studied, the hierarchy, the matrix, the lateral, and God knows what other concepts. Anil was probably better than any of us here. So, but he was a keen student, and in his own way, I would say, added to the body of knowledge in developing theories and the like. And so, along with colleagues like Anil, Visti Banerjee, Mr. Iyengar, Arun Maya, some of the old names that I will sort of recall, that he worked with all these people. And I can say this, that I think there's much legitimacy and much credit to be given to the fact that Mahi contributed to the whole arena of human resource in a very substantive way, and for which I think all of us can be thankful in industry and from a larger context that he was really in. He was able to demonstrate that this is not a fuzzy-duzzy discipline. That is a discipline that has huge implications for companies. These days, of course, this is second nature. You don't have to say it. But in those days, in the mid-70s, these were very early thoughts, and he rightfully should be. Now, I think it would be impossible in to make a comment about Mahi without making a comment about his best friend. And I, in that sense, refer to his best friends as him, his wife. I've seen them through the years, they've stayed with us, we've stayed with them, and they had a sort of a really wonderful relationship, if I must say. In many ways, the two were inseparable. You never sort of, you could never say Mahi without a him and a him without Mahi. They were inseparable. They were wonderfully compatible. In compatibility in a much more foundational way, not in a superficial way. Both were incidentally delightfully humorous. They enjoyed each other's jokes, they enjoyed jokes at each other, and so they were a wonderfully sort of humorous lot, if I may say. Disarmingly generous. I mean, here was somebody like me who didn't know them from Adam, who were just married, and without batting an eyelid, we were invited into their homes and stayed with them for 3 months. And this is a kind of generosity that isn't typical. They were amazing friends. Rain continues to be one, and not only friends between themselves, they were great friends between themselves, but I also think that they made great friends from the others. In a sort of lighter way, my wife and I often used to worry that, we don't know what's going to happen to him because when does she rest her cheeks? Because she's constantly smiling. So the cheeks must be very burdened with a constant smile on her face. And you say, so just sort of wonderful people. I think him and obviously Mahi, I suspect, in those early days of courtship, must have been charmed by him's smile and the fact that this togetherness lasted all those years was also for the fact of Mahi's considerable ability to appreciate that smile for all time. So I think in that sense, it was a wonderful example of togetherness. So him had a keen interest in German, and as a consequence of that interest in German, they acquired a whole range of friends that were quite outside the arena of Mahi's work, which sort of held them in great stead. And also, him was a wonderful sort of a whetstone for discussion. He would bounce ideas off her, and Mahi would do this, I know, on occasion quite well. And she was quite an honest and frank commentator wherever she disagreed. So really, the two were a wonderful example, and I have to say, for the fact that they didn't have any children of their own, didn't present a limitation to them. I also visited Buckingham 3 times, and each time we went and took a walk around the campus. Each time bumped into current students and past students, and each time in the evening we found somebody or the other from the campus in their home. So they had lots of children, and therefore this ability to make your family a much larger one was clearly a quality that they both had in multiple measures. So, in conclusion, what can one say? All I can say is that he is a friend I will miss, like I know many of you also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for sharing about your association and your camaraderie and all the wonderful qualities that you admire about Mahesh, and also about
I think as young people who are sort of start a life, career, want to be part of enterprises, and one is I think that find purpose. And in the early years, of course, there is good purpose around building homes and building families and making sure that homes and families do well and you have a reasonable bank account. So those are good. There's nothing wrong with that purpose. It's a good. But I believe that all of us, all human beings, inevitably wish to be part of a purpose that is larger than themselves. We all wish to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And what that bigger is something that is also partly exploration because it doesn't happen. So be a little intense when those moments come to you, I think, when you sit back and reflect. As I said, many of the discussions I can now speak about, say, with me and Mahesh, and with many others in life now, that those are very intense discussions, but they're very impacting discussions. So be intense in the search for purpose. Be intense in that. These days, as against the time when, say, 40 years ago, when I was, 45 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was in your situation, the world has really changed rather dramatically. The options are multiple, more than what used to be in our time. And therefore, you have a much, much wider, richer landscape to work on. But I would say one of the key things is to define for yourself what is the purpose of what I wish to do. And I think early in life, if you can find purpose beyond yourselves, beyond your family, yourself, you'll find it very, very enriching. And you'll find it very soul satisfying. So I would say that's an important discussion that you must have with yourselves. And of course in that process, there are many who you interact with, friends, family, colleagues, seniors, juniors, whatever it might be. But that's, I think, a very, very important part of and I, of course, have been a very strong advocate right from the early years that find purpose beyond yourself. Beyond yourself. And you'll find that it'll enrich you, it'll make you, the comment that do one good deed for a day. What's the underlying idea? That because you do a good deed, the good deed is never a good deed for yourself. It's a good deed related to the other. And why is it said? Because in doing that one good deed, the kind of satisfaction, empowerment, feel good that it does to you is amazing. So, find purpose, I think, and spend time on it. Be intense with it as you go. The second I would say is that at the end of the day, for success, you can cut corners. And you can sometimes compromise your values, you can sometimes compromise good process, you can sometimes compromise what otherwise you stand for. I urge you not to fall trapped to that idea. Think hard on what your true values are, and there are not too many, there are 8, 10 of them which really matter. And then whenever you're confronted with choices, be careful before you make compromises on values. Be careful. In the short term, there are prices to pay. There are prices to pay. Sometimes you stand up for something. But I can tell you in the medium long term, you will be an immense beneficiary of the fact that you stood up at that time. So find purpose and stick to good values that you believe. And I can tell you, I can give you hosts of examples from personal life and the life of others who do these things. But yes, at the end of the day, there are short-term, you know, you will either bear some burdens, face some challenges, face some difficulties. Yes, that happens. But in the medium long term, I can tell you, you will be just immensely more satisfied. I must give an example. I was a student in the US, and I was my college president was a student body. This is back in 1971. And you can imagine the Bay Area, California, in the late 60s, early 70s. It was a very exciting period of life. And I was college president, and I was confronted with a situation where I had to take legal action, which was unheard of on the campus, but I decided that for principle I would do it, against none other than the governor of the state, the governor of California, simply because he was chairman of the board of trustees of the University of California. And guess who the governor was? None other than Mr. Ronald Reagan, who went on to become president of the United States. And I took him to court 3 times, one twice. And on the first time when I took him to court, I was told by the college administration, I was told by a lot of friends, you better watch out. And I was told by my president of the college that, no, Mr. Singh, be careful, there could be consequences. And I said to myself, well, the worst they will do is send me home, go home. But the good part of the story is that after, as I said, I took him to court 3 times. On the first time, I had the full wrath of Governor Reagan delivered to me when I went to meet him in his office in Sacramento. The third time, when I went to him, I didn't have to go to him. When I third time took him to court, and again a matter of principle, the college president calls me and says, Mr. Singh, I had a order from the governor. And I said, well, this time I'm sure you will be thrown out. And the court proceeding didn't go any further. And he said, Mr. Singh, the governor called me and said he has met you twice. And this time he has said that he has asked me to convey to you that there is no reason to proceed with the case because he accepts the proposition that you have put. You know, the first 2 times, it was almost 7-8 months. I tell you, every day was palpitation, you know, that now I'm going to get kicked out of the country, now I'm going to get kicked out of the country. Even though I believed what I did was right. But look at the wonderful reward. Third time around, nobody less than the governor calls the college president. And I walked out of that meeting with the college president with chest out and cheering for the feeling that I was so proud that the governor had said that no, I know Mr. Singh, he will not do something which is wrong, so please accept it. He said there's no need to proceed with the case. So the idea that you sometimes will have to pay short-term prices is the case, no question about it. But if you stick with it, it will deliver you immense rewards at a personal level and also in the way that society will look at you, that the world will look at you.
Thank you. Anybody of the family who wants to speak anything about it?
I think they for us have been one of the most wonderful couples going in the family. I was quite a kid, I'm quite a bit younger than Mahesh, and he made the mistake of taking me to introduce me to him when I was 8 years old. Then he showed me a photograph of his college students and I asked him who his best friend was, and he pointed out to him. So I then decided in my 8-year intelligence that he's going to marry him. And I said this to the entire family, that he's going to marry him. No one knew this whole thing then. He did prove it right, you know, after a few years. And I was the kid sister whom he took around on his motorbike at that time. But I have to say that as I grew, he gave the respect to a person of, you know, taking your opinion seriously, asking you for an opinion and taking it very seriously. And think about what you said, you know, at 50, I was changing my entire career again in my mid-40s a few years ago. And everyone thought I'd lost my mind because, you know, in terms of success, I was doing very well and, you know, what were you doing? And I told Mahi that, you know, I'm wanting to change this. And he said, of course, only an idiot would be thinking like this at this age, you know, this is the time to do it. So forget about what anybody is saying and follow what you want to do. So he's been a great source of helping us follow what we want to do. And been a great person to have in the family.
Thank you. So what, Pradeep, you and Ravi Gilani like to share and just, yeah.
We were a GT and 70 was a dream, when we were bubbling with energy and bubbling with trying to bring changes, And there was Mahesh, who was our godfather. You can do anything, go to Mahesh, talk to him, and he will say, don't worry, I'm there. So we could take on fight with anyone, we could do everything right, and we were very, very charged. So I think good days of Mahesh and what Harpal Singh said, we had two people, Mr. Jagadha and Mr. Maira were totally different. One is absolute hardcore engineer, second was absolute chemistry physics, and a people connector. And I had the opportunity working with both. I worked with Mr. Jagadha for 1.5 years as directly executive assistant, and a fabulous training. I think Telco was a playground where you could learn, and I still feel that my 40 years of life, what I learned in the first 5 years, that was amazing. So thanks to Mahesh that he gave us opportunity to be there, to be a great place to, great environment that we needed in Telco. Mr. Mahesh was there, was a hardcore HR guy, very different. Wherever Mr. Mahesh was, all energy, beautiful listening, great empathy, and a phenomenal friend. So I think we miss him in very emotional times. Thank you.
I think this is the opportunity snare, if you can please come and read. And then we would request Harpal to give the letter to one of them, and I think Sundar can give to another, so that you want to. We want to say something about the award.
So in memory of Mr. B.S. Mahesh, who, as we know, and a few of us were not as fortunate to work with him and kind of absorb the leadership nuggets of wisdom that he had just by observing him. But we know a lot about him, and even vicariously we keep learning from the stories that you shared. We thought that the best way to honor his life and his spirit is, as we are an academic institute, and to continue that legacy would be to honor two of our students in the HR program who are attempting and looking towards and progressing towards those unique qualities that Mr. B.S. Mahesh stood for. And in that regard, we have chosen from our research assistants who've been working with us, two of our dear students who are here today, and we would like amidst the family members to celebrate Mr. Mahesh's life, his spirit, and his legacy. So here I would like to invite one of them, Anil Kundra, and we can invite a student. There are two of them, and one of them is Shreya Ganguly, who honors that spirit.
So the letter says, Dear Shavi, we are very happy to share that you are being conferred the B.S. Mahesh Memorial Award for HR Excellence.